The Horror Box, the library without windows. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, the home of the Horror Box, where the strangest Reddit horror, nightshift horror tailies, and original nightmares come alive. Tonight, I'm taking you to a place where knowledge itself becomes a trap. A library without windows, where every book knows you, and every page is watching. Before we enter, hit subscribe. The Horror Box remembers every viewer, and once you step into the library, reality may shift around you forever. It began with a rumor. My friend texted me late one night, "If you want to see a book you've never read, meet me at 3 in the morning, at the corner of 7th and Willow. The library opens only then." I laughed, thinking it was some urban legend, but I couldn't shake the curiosity. That night, I found the intersection empty, silent, under a crescent moon. Across the street, a black building appeared where there had been none before. No windows, no signs, just a faint glow from the entrance. I stepped inside. The air smelled of old paper and iron. Shelves rose impossibly high, bending out of sight. There were no windows, no clocks. The walls were lined with books, every cover blank, every spine empty. "Welcome," said a voice behind me. My own voice. I spun, but no one was there. The library had no floor plan I could recognize. I walked for what felt like hours, though I hadn't entered more than a single corridor. Each aisle seemed to stretch forever. Each book I touched vibrated faintly, like a heartbeat. I found a book lying open on a pedestal. My name was on the cover, handwritten. I flipped the pages. They were blank, except for the last one. "You've just reached the end." I laughed nervously. A joke? I whispered, but the air shifted. The temperature dropped. The books around me whispered faintly, syllables I almost recognized as my own thoughts, rearranged. I walked deeper. Every book I picked up described someone else's life in perfect detail. Their fears, their memories, their secrets. And occasionally, I saw myself, but not as I remembered. A version of me I didn't know, trapped in moments I hadn't lived yet. Then I noticed the staff, figures in dark robes, faceless, moving silently along the aisles. When I approached, they vanished. When I turned, they reappeared behind me, always watching, never speaking. I tried to leave. Every exit led to another corridor, longer than the last. The glow at the entrance vanished. The ceiling stretched higher. The shelves multiplied. I realized then, this library did not want me to leave. I sat down on the cold floor, trying to calm my racing thoughts. That's when I noticed the books shifting on their own. Pages turned, spines cracked. Words appeared and disappeared in real time. And one book, on a pedestal at the center of the library, glowed faintly. My name on it again. I opened it. The story was mine, or rather, the story of me in the library. Every step I'd taken, every book I had touched, every whispered thought written here. And yet the words were moving, changing. Sentences rearranged themselves to describe things I hadn't yet done. "Do not leave until you read the last line." The instructions were in my own handwriting, though I hadn't written them. My pulse thudded. I read. I obeyed. Hours passed, or minutes. Time had no meaning. The whispers became louder, overlapping, reciting my own fears. The floor beneath me trembled. Books stacked themselves into walls around me, enclosing me in a cube of paper. And then I saw them. My friends, my family, strangers I knew and didn't know. Each one seated at a desk, reading a book with my name on it. Their eyes were black, empty. Their mouths moved silently. Every page they turned revealed a version of me they had experienced. My life from perspectives I didn't recognize. I tried to speak. My voice was swallowed by the library. Only whispers answered. My own voice echoing from the shelves. "You are learning," it said. The words formed in midair, made of ink and shadow. You may stay, or you may leave, but the library will follow. I realized then that the library wasn't just a building. It was alive. Every book a neuron, every aisle a synapse. It thought, and it was thinking about me. I tried to run. The corridors looped infinitely. Every book I tried to throw from the shelves returned, landing at my feet. The faceless figures glided silently behind me, guiding, observing, judging. Hours or lifetimes later, I found a small desk with a single pen and paper. I wrote a note. I understand. When I looked up, the library had shifted. The entrance appeared. Daylight. The street was normal. No black building. No glow. I returned home, exhausted, terrified. But the books followed me. I found one in my mailbox the next day, my name on the cover. Blank pages, except the last. You are never alone. Since then, shadows flicker in my apartment. Books whisper faintly in corners. And sometimes, when I'm not looking, I hear pages turning. The library is patient. It waits, and it knows my every thought. That was the Horror Box, the library without windows, brought to you by Halfway Dark. If you've ever wanted to peek inside forbidden knowledge, or feel that someone or something is reading over your shoulder, subscribe. The Horror Box remembers every visitor, every thought, every secret. In the library, it's always open. Step inside, but beware, some books are alive. The Horror Box, the mirror that remembers too much. Welcome back to Halfway Dark. You've just stepped into the Horror Box, where nothing is ever just a reflection. Before we begin, subscribe now. If you don't, this story might follow you home. And trust me, once the mirror remembers you, it won't forget. I don't buy antiques. Too much history, too many fingerprints, too much leftover energy. But this mirror, I couldn't resist. It was tall, framed in tarnished gold, the kind of thing you'd expect in a crumbling Victorian house. The seller, a frail old man at a flea market, leaned close and whispered, "This one's not like the others. Be careful. It remembers." I laughed it off, but the frame had weight, presence. So I bought it, hauled it into my apartment, leaned it against the bedroom wall. That night, I woke to a noise, a faint tapping. I thought it was pipes or maybe the neighbors. But then I noticed something strange. The mirror surface was rippling, like water under moonlight. And my reflection wasn't me. It looked like me, yes, but the mouth was moving, whispering, except I couldn't hear it. I leaned closer. My reflection leaned closer. Then it smiled, just slightly, while I stood stone-faced. I stumbled back, heart pounding. When I blinked, the image corrected itself. Just me, groggy, pale. I convinced myself it was exhaustion. I worked night shifts. Lack of sleep does weird things. But the next day, I noticed details, little inconsistencies. I'd brush my teeth. My reflection lingered half a second too long with the brush in its mouth. I'd blink. My reflection blinked late, like it was playing catch-up. And once, as I turned away, I swear I saw it still watching me. I covered the mirror with a sheet. Out of sight, out of mind. That night, the tapping came back, louder. I tried to ignore it, but around 3 a.m, the sheet slipped. I sat up in bed. The reflection was standing. Not sitting like me. Standing, pressed against the glass from the inside, palms flat. Its face, my face, was pale, lips stretched in a grin too wide, teeth too sharp, and it was mouthing something over and over. Let me out. I froze, unable to breathe. The tapping turned into pounding, my reflection slamming its fists against the glass. The next morning, the mirror looked normal again, except now there were faint smudges on the inside of the glass. Handprints. I tried to get rid of it, took it down to the curb, left it for trash. But when I came back upstairs, It was leaning against my bedroom wall again. I locked the door, left for work, came back. It was in the bathroom. No one had keys but me. And it wasn't just the reflection anymore. It started showing things I'd forgotten. Memories. I'd walk past it and see myself as a child, hiding under the table while my parents fought. I'd see myself in college, crying alone in the library stacks. I'd see myself sleeping, from angles that suggested the mirror had been watching when I wasn't looking. It was remembering for me, and the more it remembered, the more it showed me things that never happened. I saw myself walking into traffic, saw myself pulling open the mirror's surface like a door and stepping through, saw myself with eyes blackened, teeth rotting, whispering words that made the room feel colder. And then 2 nights ago, I woke to find my reflection sitting on my chest. It didn't move, just sat there, staring down at me, grinning. Its breath fogged the air. My lungs locked as if something pressed against me from the inside. When I finally blinked, I was alone in bed. The mirror was across the room, but my reflection was still smiling. That's where I am now, writing this, watching the mirror from the corner of my eye. Because the reflection isn't waiting anymore. It's pacing, testing the edges. And I know, sooner or later, it won't just be a reflection. The old man's words echo in my head. This one remembers, and I think it remembers a version of me that wants out. If you ever see a mirror that doesn't quite line up, that lingers, that smiles when you don't keep it. Don't let it in your house. Because once the mirror remembers you, it never lets go. That was the horror box. The mirror that remembers too much. Told only on Halfway Dark. If you're listening right now, maybe a reflection has been just a little too still. Maybe it's smiling when you're not. Step further into the darkness with us. Subscribe to Halfway Dark, because the horror box is always hungry for one more memory. The horror box. The house that rearranges itself. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, the home of the horror box, where the strangest and scariest Reddit horror stories, nightshift horror tales, and original nightmares come to life. Tonight, I'm bringing you a story that will make you question the safety of your own walls. A house that moves while you sleep. Before we begin, hit subscribe. Once the house notices you, being alone in the dark may no longer feel like safety. Every story here is designed to chill, unsettle, and linger long after the lights go out. And this one, in particular, will leave you second-guessing every hallway, every door, every shadow. I moved into the apartment in late October, a cheap 2-bedroom in a building that smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet, and I fell asleep easily. But when I woke, the bedroom door was across the room. Not slightly ajar, it was completely moved, as if the wall had been lifted and shifted. I froze, staring at the space I had entered hours before. I had no furniture yet. Nothing heavy could have pushed it. I checked the hinges. Nothing was broken. I told myself it was a dream. The next night, I woke to the sound of creaking floors, though I was alone. The living room was longer, the kitchen wider. Hallways seemed to stretch into shadows I couldn't reach. I walked through the apartment slowly, mapping it mentally. By the morning, it had returned to normal. I started taking notes, recording everything. But as the days went on, the changes became subtler, almost imperceptible at first. A picture frame too close to the edge of the wall. A carpet rug slightly skewed. The hallway closet that used to be empty held a small, unmarked box. Inside was a note, written in my handwriting. Check the walls after midnight. I laughed nervously. Sleep deprivation? Maybe. But later that night, I did it. I pressed my ear against the wall in the hallway, and I swear I heard it breathing. Not air, not pipes. Like the walls themselves had lungs. I started filming every corner, every doorway, every step. But when I watched the footage, the rooms were always just slightly off. A door that had been closed in the video was open in real life. A hallway appeared in the camera where none existed. The house was learning, watching me, adjusting itself. By the end of the first week, I was terrified. Doors no longer led where I thought. Stairs seemed longer, then shorter. And at night, I often woke to find furniture subtly moved. A chair facing the wall. A table shifted a few inches to the left. I began to ask the neighbors, "Has anyone else noticed this building moving?" They stared blankly. "No, it's the same as always," they said. Even the maintenance guy shrugged. "It's an old building," he said. "Floors settle, walls breathe." But I knew the difference between settling and deliberate movement. I felt the intelligence behind it. One night, around 2 a.m, I was woken by the sound of my bedroom door opening. I froze. The room was still dark. The door slowly creaked wider. I reached for my phone. The light revealed nothing. But the hallway beyond had changed. I had never seen that hallway before. It stretched impossibly long, with walls narrowing as if they were funneling me in. The air was thick, almost wet. And then I noticed the shadows. Long, spindly, stretching across the floor. They moved independently, twitching toward me, recoiling when I stepped closer. I ran to my apartment door. It wouldn't open. The handle turned, the lock clicked, but the door didn't budge. Panic rose, clawing at my chest. I could hear faint whispers echoing behind the walls. Not words, but syllables I almost recognized, my own voice, calling my name. I remembered the note. Check the walls after midnight. I pressed my hand against the plaster. It was warm, pulsing, alive. A thin vibration ran up my arm. The walls were alive, and they were aware. By the 3rd week, I had learned the rules. The house wouldn't harm me if I obeyed, but testing its limits invited consequences. Move furniture without care, and I'd wake with it stacked unnaturally, forming barriers. Open a door I shouldn't, and I'd hear faint screams echoing from the rooms I'd never entered. I became a prisoner in my own apartment. I left nothing in the hallway. I left doors closed as instructed, and I began sleeping lightly, half-conscious. Every creak, every shuffle of air was a warning. Every shadow was a teacher. Then one night, I woke and the apartment had changed entirely. I wasn't in my bedroom. I was in a room that looked like my apartment, but wasn't. The ceiling was higher. The walls were black, but patterned faintly like wallpaper I recognized from my old childhood home. A faint humming vibrated from the walls. And on the floor, in red letters, freshly painted or carved, I couldn't tell, was a message. You're learning. You may stay. I panicked. I wanted out. I tried doors. They didn't lead anywhere familiar. I tried my windows. The city outside was wrong. Buildings leaned at impossible angles. Lights flickered, but in patterns I couldn't understand. The house had pulled me entirely into its logic, its geometry, its consciousness. I realized then that I wasn't just living in the apartment. I was inside the house's mind, and it had been watching me all along, learning, adjusting, waiting to see what I would do next. I began documenting everything meticulously. Every change, every shift, every whisper. I filmed constantly, and yet the videos didn't match reality. Hallways that were long in my memory were short in the footage. Doors I remembered opening were always closed. Objects moved without anyone touching them. The house wasn't just alive, it was teaching me. And the more I obeyed, the more it trusted me. I started leaving notes for myself in places I hadn't remembered writing them. But when I woke, the handwriting wasn't mine. The house had begun to write back. I still live there. I'm careful now. Every step measured. Every door respected. Every wall treated like it's listening. And at night, I hear it shifting, breathing, thinking. Sometimes I think it's proud of me. Sometimes I think it's just playing a game I'll never win. That was the Horror Box, the house that rearranges itself. Brought to you by Halfway Dark. If your own walls feel too quiet tonight, or your doors seem just slightly off, subscribe. Step inside the Horror Box. Every story here is a rule, every shadow a lesson. And the house? It's always learning. The Horror Box. The night shift caller, welcome back to Halfway Dark, the home of the Horror Box, where the darkest Reddit horror stories and night shift tailies come alive. Tonight's story will keep you awake long after the lights go out, about a night shift that never ends and a caller you can't ignore. Before we begin, hit subscribe. Once the line starts ringing, the Horror Box knows you're listening, and it may decide to join you in the dark. Every whisper, every shadow, every pause is part of the story, and it's watching. I took the night shift at the 24-hour convenience store because I needed money and peace. I thought it would be quiet. I thought wrong. The first week passed uneventfully. Regulars, a tired trucker, a drunk man at 2 a.m, someone picking up milk at 3:17. But then the calls started. It was always the same. My store's phone ringing in the dead hours. I answered once, half asleep, a line of static. Then my voice, my exact voice. "I shouldn't be here," it said. I slammed the receiver down. My heartbeat rattled my ribs. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe I was losing sleep. The next night, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. But the receiver lifted itself slightly, like someone unseen had picked it up. And the voice came anyway. "You're here again. Don't leave." I ran to the break room, but the doors were locked. Not from the outside, from inside. The lights flickered. The fluorescent hum warped, slowing then speeding up. My reflection in the glass door seemed delayed, moving half a second after I did. My own hands reached for the intercom, and the voice stopped, replaced by a soft chuckle. I told myself it was exhaustion, but the pattern was clear. Every night, at 1:03 a.m, the phone rang. And every night, my voice begged me not to leave. I tried recording it. The footage played back as normal. No static, no strange phenomena. Only my own mundane night shift. I asked coworkers if anyone else had experienced it. They looked at me blankly. "Nope. Only you work the night shift," they said. The truckers, the late-night wanderers, none reported anything unusual. And then the caller started giving instructions. Not commands, exactly. Suggestions. Look under the counter. Check the security cameras. Don't leave until the clock strikes 3. I followed them. Each instruction seemed mundane, but each resulted in a shift in the store. A rack slightly moved. A shelf tilted. An aisle longer than it had been when I arrived. By the third week, I realized the calls were tracking me. My voice wasn't the only one speaking through the line. Sometimes the voice of a stranger joined mine, faint, distorted, whispering secrets about me that I hadn't told anyone. It knew my fears, my routines, my weaknesses, and it knew when I doubted myself. One night, I stayed past 4 a.m. The store was empty, silent, except for the ringing phone. I ignored it. I left the receiver on the hook. The voice came anyway. "Do you see it?" I turned slowly. The aisle seemed to stretch infinitely. The products warped. Milk cartons floated slightly above the shelves. Snacks quivered. And there, in the reflection of the cooler doors, me. Only wrong. Too still. My eyes black. My mouth moving silently. The voice continued, "Don't leave." "Not yet. We're waiting." I backed toward the door. The lights went out. My own shadow rose from the floor, independent of my movement, pointing at the back aisle. I ran, but the layout had changed. Every aisle led me in circles. The exit, the front door, the parking lot, gone. The store was infinite. Every checkout lane stretched into darkness, and the phone ringing in the void, my voice calling me from every corner. I tried to scream, but the sound came out wrong. A whisper of myself, repeated infinitely. The shelves quivered. Products fell in slow motion, creating walls and corridors I couldn't escape. I stopped, terrified, trying to understand the rules. It wasn't just a caller. It was a test. Every movement, every thought, every panic, recorded and replayed back at me. I realized it wanted obedience. Follow the instructions, and I could survive. Break them, and the store became an endless trap. I followed the next set of instructions carefully. Walk to the back. Look at the freezer doors. Don't blink. Don't breathe too heavily. Open one slowly. I did. Inside was a corridor. Not a freezer, not a room, but a hall stretching endlessly into darkness. And along the walls, faces. Familiar faces. Friends, family, neighbors, strangers. All staring silently, waiting. I had no choice. I walked through. Every step echoed as if the floor remembered my movements from years ago. The whispers followed me, my voice guiding me forward. The hallway ended in a mirrored wall. I could see everything: the aisles, the shelves, the front counter, the store as it should have been, but warped, bleeding into infinity. And in the mirror, my reflection waved at me. Or rather, my other self, the version that never left the line ringing. You've come this far. Stay. I stepped back. The floor shifted. The lights flickered violently. I woke up the next morning in the break room. Everything was normal, except the phone was off the hook, quietly ringing. And I knew, deep inside, that tonight, and every night after, it would call again. It always calls, and it waits for you too. That was the horror box, the night shift caller, here on Halfway Dark. If you work late, if you're alone, if the phone in your home rings, subscribe. The horror box may already know your number. Every listener becomes part of the story. Every shadow a reflection of the caller waiting in the dark. Step inside. Answer the call if you dare. The horror box. The mannequin at the bus stop. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, the home of the horror box, where the strangest Reddit horror stories, night shift horror tales, and original nightmares come alive. Tonight's story will follow a commuter whose life becomes a waking nightmare when something unmoving at a bus stop refuses to stay lifeless. Before we begin, hit subscribe. Once you notice it, the horror box knows you're paying attention. Some shadows never forget who sees them. It started innocuously. I was taking the 11:15 p.m. bus home from work. The streets were empty, lit only by flickering streetlights. And there it was, a mannequin at the bus stop. Plastic, pristine, wearing a long coat I thought I'd seen in a shop window earlier that week. I shrugged. Someone had probably left it there as a joke. The next night, same time, same place, same mannequin. I laughed nervously. Maybe I was overworked. Maybe I was imagining it. But the feeling in my gut said otherwise. I started timing it. Every night, 11:15 p.m., the mannequin was there. Always looking straight ahead, never moving. Always perfectly aligned with the bus stop sign. Then it blinked. I was staring at my phone when its head jerked slightly. I froze. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the next night, I noticed subtle changes. Its posture was different. The coat was dusted with dirt, though it had rained. Its hands were slightly bent, fingers curled just enough to feel alive. I started walking a different route home. I hoped it was just coincidence. But the mannequin appeared on every corner I passed. Always watching, always just outside my peripheral vision. I told myself I was imagining it, but the next night, I stayed late at work. The streets were empty. The mannequin stood at the bus stop, holding a small sign I hadn't seen before. Do not ignore me. I dropped my bag. A cold sweat ran down my spine. The bus came. I didn't get on. I couldn't move. The following week, the mannequin began appearing inside my apartment. Small at first. On a shelf. Behind a door. Always perfectly aligned. Always wearing the same coat, but sometimes its eyes were slightly darker. Sometimes its lips curled just a millimeter. I stopped sleeping. I stopped leaving my apartment. I couldn't stop checking corners. Shadows seemed to lengthen toward me, as if guided by its gaze. I called the police once. They checked. Nothing. No signs of entry. No one outside my building. No traces of a mannequin anywhere. I started photographing it. The photos always showed a blur. Not quite a mannequin. Not quite human. And then it spoke. Not words, not voice, but in my head. You've noticed me. You can't forget me. We are linked now. I tried to move. I tried to throw it out of my apartment. But every time I turned my back, it returned. Always pristine. Always waiting. Always observing. I began noticing other mannequins. On the street. In shop windows. In other apartments. They were all watching. Waiting. Learning. Mimicking. One night, I woke to a tapping sound. The mannequin was standing at the foot of my bed. Its fingers moved slightly. Its head tilted. And the eyes were mine. A whisper inside my head. Do not blink. I couldn't. I tried. My eyelids felt glued together. And when I finally forced them open, the apartment was gone. The walls were streets. The ceiling, a sky I didn't recognize. Mannequins lined every alley, every doorway, every window. And I was in the middle, frozen, observed by thousands of silent faces. All my face, all my expressions, all my fear. I realized then it wasn't just one mannequin. It was every mannequin, every display, every figure, every empty-eyed watcher. They were alive, and I was their tether. I screamed. No sound came out. The whispers intensified. My own voice, layered, echoing. You see, you remember, you belong. I tried to run. Streets looped impossibly. Alleyways stretched into infinity. Every time I turned a corner, a new mannequin appeared. Closer, larger, more detailed. Some moved, just slightly. Some blinked, some smiled. Hours, days? Later, I found myself back at my apartment building. Everything appeared normal. The mannequin was gone. The city was silent. The bus stop was empty. I thought it was over. It wasn't. I returned to the bus stop 2 nights later. A new mannequin had taken its place. Not the same one, but familiar. Its eyes glimmered with recognition. Its posture deliberate. And I knew, even as I walked past it, that it would follow. That it had learned my habits, my fear, my roots. That it would always be waiting, somewhere just beyond my vision, linking itself to me, feeding on my recognition, my attention, my terror. That was the Horror Box, the mannequin at the bus stop, brought to you by Halfway Dark. If you see a mannequin staring, or a shadow in a corner that shouldn't move, subscribe. The Horror Box knows who's watching, and once you notice, you may never be alone again. Step inside to Halfway Dark, but remember, some watchers never blink. The Horror Box, the radio that whispers names. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, home of the Horror Box, where Reddit horror, nightshift horror tailies, and original nightmares collide. Tonight's story is about a radio that doesn't just play music. It knows you, it watches you, and it whispers names no one should ever hear. Before we begin, hit subscribe. The Horror Box remembers every listener. Every name it whispers is a key. And once you hear it, the darkness may follow you home. It started on a quiet Tuesday night. I was sifting through a thrift store when I found it. A small antique radio. The label read nothing. The dial was scratched. The speaker grill was dusty. I was drawn to it immediately. I brought it home, plugged it in, and turned it on. Static, a faint hum. And then, my name, Daniel. I froze. I lived alone. My name had not been spoken, not outside my mind. I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe a commercial, a song lyric that sounded like my name. I turned the dial. The voice stopped. I laughed nervously and went to bed. The next night, it came again. Not just my name. Others I knew. Friends, family, people I hadn't seen in years. Daniel, Sarah, Tom. Every name whispered softly, elongated, almost melodic. I checked online. No reports of this radio behaving strangely. Nothing in forums. It was mine alone. Then it started predicting events. 3:17 in the morning. He will fall. I woke at exactly 3:17 to a loud crash in my kitchen. A cup from the counter had fallen. I shook, heart racing. Coincidence, I told myself, but the predictions grew more precise. Sarah, crying at 2:43 p.m. I received a text hours later. Sarah had broken down at work, exactly then. Tom, do not leave before midnight. Hours later, Tom was hit by a minor accident when leaving home early. I realized the radio was not just predicting. It was observing, recording, and possibly influencing events. The static became oppressive. At night, I couldn't sleep. The whispers filled every corner of my apartment, layered over each other, overlapping, repeating names in patterns I couldn't ignore. I tried turning the radio off. It hummed on, unplugged. I moved it to the balcony. It played quietly through the open window. I placed it in a locked closet. The voices echoed faintly, coming from the walls. Then one night, it spoke my deepest fear. Daniel, alone forever. I shook violently. My apartment felt alive. The shadows leaned closer, the corners warped, and the hum of the radio resonated in my chest like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I realized it wanted attention, obedience, recognition. Every time I stared at it, it whispered more names, more events, more secrets. It had been listening my whole life, learning patterns, discovering fears. I tested it. I ignored the predictions. I tried to resist. The radio shrieked. A wave of static, a blinding pulse of sound, then silence. My apartment had shifted subtly. The walls weren't quite parallel, the corners sharper, shadows flickering. Something unseen moved in the periphery of my vision. I understood then. It wasn't just a radio. It was a conduit. A device tied to the horror box. A medium for something beyond comprehension. Feeding on attention, fear, and names. The next night, I did exactly as it instructed. Wrote every name it whispered on paper. Followed the times it called out. Obeyed every subtle suggestion it gave. The whisper slowed, softened, almost as if it approved. And then it spoke in a voice that was both mine and not mine. You see, you remember, you obey, you belong. I realized I had become part of it. I could never unplug it again. I could never ignore it. And sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers of people I haven't met yet. Names that feel familiar. Names I fear I will soon know in ways I cannot imagine. Every time I leave the apartment, I feel watched. The radio may be here, or it may have followed me. And every phone call, every alert, every vibration reminds me that the horror box sees all, remembers all. It's patient, it waits. And the more I listen, the closer it comes. That was the horror box, the radio that whispers names, brought to you by Halfway Dark. If you hear a voice calling your name when no one is there, subscribe. The horror box remembers every listener, every name, every fear. And the radio, it never forgets. Step inside, but beware, the whispers may already be following you. The horror box, the The shadow that isn't yours. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, where the horror box opens only for those who dare. Tonight, we'll step into a story that will claw at your nerves. A shadow that moves without you. A darkness that refuses to obey. Before the light flickers and your reflection betrays you, hit subscribe. The horror box watches every shadow you cast, and some of them don't belong to you. Shadows are supposed to follow you. That's the rule. You move, they move. Simple. But rules break when you're tired, when you're working nights, when the world feels thinner. It started after a late shift. The lobby lights of the building buzzed overhead as I walked across the marble floor. My footsteps echoed. My shadow stretched ahead of me, long and sharp. But then it twitched, not in sync, not quite right. I froze, lifted my hand. My shadow followed, a second late. My stomach dropped. I waved both arms. My shadow copied, sluggish, like it was learning, delayed, unsure. I told myself I was imagining it, just exhaustion. But when I turned to leave, my shadow didn't. It stayed rooted to the ground, head cocked, hands twitching like it was eager to separate. I ran. The next morning, I checked the mirror. My reflection was normal. My shadow clung close, for a while. Then I noticed it again in the subway, the dull fluorescent lights revealing everything too harshly. People's shadows lined the platform, all obedient, all matching their owners, except mine. It leaned further than me, bent in ways my body couldn't. Its fingers twitched. Its head tilted slightly when mine stayed still. No one else seemed to notice. I thought about telling someone, a friend, a coworker. But how? Hey, my shadow isn't mine anymore? They'd laugh, or worse. That night, I closed all my blinds. Sat in the dark, I thought. No light, no shadow. I was wrong. I woke up at 3:33 in the morning, the hour the horror box loves. Moonlight spilled through the cracks of my blinds, and on the far wall, my shadow. Except I was lying in bed, still, breathing. But my shadow stood, stretched, fingers curling, uncoiling. I couldn't move. Not fear, paralysis. Like it had stolen something. Like it was siphoning motion from me. When I blinked, it leaned closer. A head cock, the same way it had done in the lobby. And then it whispered, "You're late." I screamed. The sound barely left my throat. The shadow snapped back to the wall. My body lurched free. I turned on every light in the apartment, sat awake until morning. The days blurred. I couldn't escape it. Every reflective surface, every flicker of light, revealed it wasn't mine anymore. In the grocery store, my shadow reached for items I didn't touch. In my office, it stood when I sat. On the street, under lamplight, it split. Two arms, two heads, merging back together when anyone else looked. And the worst part? People started staring at me differently, like they saw something crawling just behind me. I tried rituals, salt across the floor, candles lit in circles. I prayed, whispered, screamed. But shadows don't care about prayers. They care about patience, about attention. One night, I tested it. I stood still, didn't move. My shadow twitched, moved its fingers, slowly raised its arm. My arm didn't move. It laughed, a dry sound stretched thin. And then it stepped forward, not the whole way, just half an inch, peeling. Part of it bled into the room, smeared across the floor like oil. I screamed, and the lights blew out. The room went black. When the emergency power flickered back on, it was gone. Or maybe hiding. Now, it doesn't even pretend. My shadow lingers where I don't. Sometimes I catch it standing behind me in the reflection of my phone. Sometimes I see it walk past the doorframe at night. Sometimes I hear its whisper in the dark. "You're late. The horror box is open." I don't sleep much anymore. Every shadow on the wall could be mine or not. And sometimes when I move, I feel it tug back, holding me, testing, waiting for the moment it can peel away completely. If you see a shadow that twitches wrong, don't ignore it. Don't pretend it's nothing. Shadows are supposed to obey. But when they don't, they aren't yours anymore. And trust me, they want out. That was the horror box. The shadow that isn't yours. Only here on Halfway Dark. Shadows are loyal until they aren't. And if you've ever felt your reflection or shadow hesitate for just a second too long, then you've already stepped inside the horror box. Subscribe now if you dare, because here on Halfway Dark, we don't just tell stories. We open doors that never close. The horror box, the town with no exits. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, home of the horror box, where strange things crawl in through cracks you didn't even know were there. Tonight, we're taking you into a town you can't leave, no matter how hard you try. Before we start, subscribe now. Once you step into the horror box, you'll need all the light you can carry. It was supposed to be a quick detour. I was driving back from a late-night shift, half awake, when my GPS rerouted me through a small town I'd never noticed before. The sign said, "Welcome to Ashford. Population?" Yes, 3 question marks. I laughed, rubbed my eyes. Probably vandalism. I figured I'd grab gas, maybe coffee, then be back on the highway. The town looked normal at first. Houses, street lamps, gas stations. But the streets were eerily empty. No cars. No people. Not even a stray dog. Just rows of houses with lights glowing faintly behind curtains. At the gas station, the pumps worked, but the attendant wasn't there. The coffee machine brewed, steaming into the air, but no one had poured a cup. I should have turned back then, but I didn't. Instead, I drove deeper. Street after street twisted into more streets. Each block looked the same. 2-story houses, porch lights on, windows glowing faintly. I circled back to the gas station, or I thought I did. Except now it was on the opposite side of the road, and the sign above the door didn't say Ashford Gas anymore. It just said, "Stay." I pressed the gas pedal hard. Street after street blurred by. Stop signs, yield signs, crosswalks. And then the welcome sign again. "Welcome to Ashford. Population?" My stomach dropped. I turned the wheel hard, took random turns, trying to shake the loop. But no matter where I went, I ended up back at the sign. I parked the car and stepped out. The air was heavy, thick. The silence pressed against my ears. I walked toward one of the houses. Through the window, I saw shadows moving. Figures. They weren't shaped quite right. Too long in the arms, too thin in the heads. They twitched like marionettes. I knocked on the door. The shadows froze. Then, all at once, every porch light on the street flicked off. Darkness swallowed me. I stumbled back to my car, fumbling for my keys. The door wouldn't open. My shadow, yes, my shadow, was bent the wrong way on the pavement, stretching up toward the house instead of behind me. I ran, not back to the car, just away, down the street. The houses blurred together. Signs bent overhead, repeating, "Stay, stay." Eventually, I collapsed against a bench. My chest heaved, lungs burning. That's when I saw the clock tower at the town center. Midnight. But the hands twitched, chittered, stuck between numbers, unable to move. Then I noticed something worse. People. Finally people. Standing in the square. Dozens of them. All facing me. Their faces were blank. No features. Just smooth skin where mouths and eyes should be. They raised their arms, in perfect unison, pointing at me. And then the shadows moved. Not theirs. Mine. It stretched away from me, joining theirs, merging into one massive blot of black that writhed across the cobblestones. And from inside that shifting dark, I heard whispers. Stay, stay. I screamed, ran again. I don't remember how long. The streets twisted, folding in on themselves. The welcome sign appeared again and again, haunting me. At some point, I blacked out. When I woke, I was in my car, engine running, highway stretched ahead. The town behind me gone, but my GPS still shows Ashford every time I drive at night, no matter where I am. Always just a few turns away. And sometimes, when I look in the rearview mirror, I see houses in the distance, porch lights glowing, and faceless figures waiting. If you ever see a welcome sign with question marks for the population, don't enter. Because once Ashford lets you in, it doesn't want to let you out. That was the horror box, the town with no exits, only on Halfway Dark. If you've ever been lost on a late night drive, if the GPS has ever sent you somewhere strange, maybe you've brushed the edge of Ashford already. Don't just listen from the outside. Step further into the dark. Subscribe to Halfway Dark, because the horror box has more doors than you realize. The horror box, the elevator to floor 19. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, the home of the horror box, where Reddit horror, nightshift horror tailies, and original nightmares collide. Tonight, we enter an elevator that doesn't obey the laws of reality, a floor that shouldn't exist, a building that hides a secret in plain sight. Before we ride, hit subscribe. The horror box is watching. Once you step inside, every floor, every shadow, every number may follow you home. I was working late at the office building downtown, the last one to leave. The fluorescent lights flickered, buzzing faintly. I pressed the elevator button on the lobby floor, tired, wanting nothing more than to get home. The elevator arrived. Doors slid open with the familiar metallic whisper. I stepped inside, pressed the button for my floor. 12. The buttons lit, the elevator hummed. It stopped. The display flickered. 19. I frowned. There was number 19th floor. The building only had 18. I hesitated, but the doors opened anyway. A dim hallway stretched beyond, longer than it should have been. Walls painted a gray that didn't match the lobby, lights that pulsed faintly. I stepped forward. Something about the air was wrong. Heavy, wet, alive. The smell of old paper and metal. The ceiling stretched higher than it should. I called out. Nothing, only the hum of the lights. The hallway had doors, dozens of them, each with a small brass number plate, engraved 1901, 1902, 1903. I tried to turn back. The elevator doors were gone. The hallway had swallowed them. I walked to the first door. The brass number felt warm. I opened it. Inside, an office, my office. Everything identical, but older. Dust settled in layers that didn't exist before. Files on my desk contained memories I didn't remember. Emails I hadn't sent. Conversations I had never had. I closed the door. My reflection in the glass wall wasn't mine. It was older, tired, hollow-eyed, smiling at me. I tried the next door. A living room. The furniture arranged like a home I had never lived in. Family portraits lined the walls. Me, but with faces I didn't know. Shadows moved behind the frames. I stepped back. The door slammed shut. I realized then, this floor, this building, it wasn't static. It was alive, watching, recording, learning. I walked. Hallway after hallway, doors after doors. Every room showed a life I could have lived. Choices I didn't make. Decisions I hadn't dared. Every reflection mocked me, showing me what I might become. And then the whispers started, faint at first, from the walls, from the elevator shaft behind the closed doors. My own voice, overlapping, repeating, calling my name. You're here. You're late. You shouldn't be here. I ran, The hallway twisted, doors disappeared. The floor vibrated softly. Shadows stretched impossibly. I reached a window, but outside was nothing. Only gray, endless, stretching to infinity. I tried to scream. My voice came out wrong, layered. My own words repeating, distorted. Every step I took echoed ahead of me. And then I saw them. People, or something like them, sitting at desks, standing in doorways, watching. They weren't moving, yet I could feel their attention, sharp and precise. And in their eyes, me, multiple versions of me. Every choice I had ever made, every life I could have lived, staring silently. I backed up, terrified. The floor shifted. A wall became a staircase. I climbed, desperate. The elevator appeared. The doors opened. The display, 19. I stepped in, pressed my floor, 12. The buttons lit. The doors closed. The elevator hummed. The lights flickered. And then I was home. My apartment, normal, quiet, safe. But when I looked at the clock, 3:33 in the morning. I hadn't been gone long. Or had I? The hallway outside my apartment stretched slightly. Shadows lingered just a fraction too long. The next night I returned. Elevator, 19 again. Every floor I tried led to rooms I recognized and hadn't lived in. Offices with my name on them. Homes with my face in the family portraits. Hallways with versions of me walking, staring, waiting. The elevator isn't a machine. It's a bridge. Between lives, between choices. Between versions of me that exist and never existed. I stopped trying to resist. I follow. I watch. I obey. The horror box taught me the rules. The elevator hums. I step inside. Doors open. 19. And every time, the whispers grow louder. My name, my fears, my choices. Every shadow, every reflection, every silent observer reminds me the building is alive. And it has been patient, waiting for me. I no longer sleep easily. I never take the elevator alone. And sometimes, late at night, I hear the soft hum of an elevator outside my window, rising to a floor that shouldn't exist. And I know, when I step inside next, the horror box will be watching, waiting, teaching. That was the horror box, the elevator to floor 19, brought to you by Halfway Dark. If you've ever entered an elevator and felt the floor shift beneath you, subscribe. The horror box sees every movement, remembers every choice, and every shadow may be waiting for you at floor 19. Step inside, but remember, some floors exist only for the patient, the observant, the watched. The horror box, the unremembered guest. Welcome back to Halfway Dark, where the horror box, Reddit horror stories, and nightshift horror stories merge into nightmares you can't escape. Tonight's story is unlike anything you've heard. A dinner party with a guest no one remembers inviting, who knows secrets no one should. Before the terror begins, hit subscribe. Once you step inside this story, the horror box knows you're listening, and it may follow you into your own rooms tonight. It started innocently enough. An email from a friend. Dinner tonight. You'll love it. Everyone's coming. I arrived at the apartment building, just as dusk swallowed the streets. The foyer smelled faintly of lavender and something metallic. A feeling tickled at the back of my neck, the kind that whispers you're being watched. I shook it off. The apartment was warm, alive with conversation. Familiar friends, laughter, the clinking of glasses. But then I saw him. A man sitting at the far end of the table, smiling, polished, quiet, watching. And no one introduced him. No one noticed him. I asked a friend, "Who's that?" They frowned. "Who?" I swallowed. They couldn't see him. The air around him shimmered slightly, like heat above asphalt. But his smile was real. And he waved at me, politely, as if I were the only one who could see him. I wanted to leave. I tried to excuse myself, but when I reached for my coat, it wasn't there. Instead, a wine glass floated in midair, spinning slowly, then shattered on the floor. "Relax," the man said. His voice was soft, melodic, and somehow my own. "You're part of the evening now." I sat. My friends laughed at nothing. Conversation continued as if he wasn't there. But I couldn't look away. He began telling stories. Stories about each of us. Secrets no one else knew. Things buried deep in our minds. Memories we hadn't shared. When he mentioned me, my stomach turned. "You hid this from yourself," he said. "But I remember. I remember what you did the night the lights went out." I froze. How could he know? My pulse thudded painfully. The room started to twist subtly. The chandelier stretched taller. The walls narrowed. Shadows grew and stretched across the carpet in impossible angles. My friends' faces warped subtly until I wasn't sure they were real. And then the man stood. His smile never faltered. "I came to remind you, you are part of the rules now." I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like the room was drawing me inward. The floor beneath me softened, almost liquid. The laughter of my friends became high-pitched, overlapping voices that I could barely parse. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. The man's eyes were too black now, perfect voids. And the reflection in the window wasn't mine. It smiled. "Every choice you made, every secret you buried, it's mine to keep." I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, the table had shifted. The chairs were stacked on top of each other. My friends were frozen mid-laughter, and the man closer. Closer than the laws of physics should allow. He reached for my hand. I tried to pull away. My skin felt thick, heavy, as if gravity had doubled. He grinned. My own voice whispered from his mouth, "Don't resist. You're safe as long as you obey." I noticed notes on the table, written in my handwriting. "Do not speak. Do not move. Watch the guest." I hadn't written them, but I obeyed. I couldn't do otherwise. The man began walking around the room, touching objects. Where his fingers lingered, the items aged and decayed, then repaired themselves, but in the wrong order. A candle burned from base to wick. A glass of water rippled with fish that had never existed. Every time he paused, he stared at me. And I understood. He wasn't just watching. He was learning, recording, testing. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time felt liquid. The man leaned over, close enough that his breath smelled of ozone and iron. "Do you know why I came?" I shook my head. My throat wouldn't move. "To show you everything you hide from the world, and everything you hide from yourself. Every fear, every shame, every regret. All of it mine now." I could feel the apartment pulsing beneath me. The walls weren't walls. They were the skeleton of something else. Something vast, watching, waiting. Then the man smiled wider. He disappeared into the shadows, leaving a faint outline, the faint smell of ozone and iron. And when I blinked, the apartment returned to normal. My friends looked up at me, confused. "You've been quiet," one said. "Are you okay?" I nodded, but I knew the truth. The guest hadn't left. Not really. I saw him in reflections, in corners of my eyes, in fleeting shadows on the wall, always smiling, waiting, learning. The next day, I found a note in my handwriting. "Do not invite strangers. They already know your name." I didn't write it. I didn't need to. And every night since, the phone rings. A soft whisper of my voice on the line. "You are not alone. You never will be." That was the Horror Box, the Unremembered Guest, brought to you by Halfway Dark. If you ever feel someone watching during a dinner, or notice shadows in your own apartment that shouldn't exist, subscribe. The Horror Box doesn't forget. Every listener, every viewer, every night shift, every whispered secret, it knows. Step inside But remember, the guest is already here.